everyone to our Business in Focus webinar on information security. Stop your email from getting your business hacked. It's being presented by Ray Kim of Simplified IT. And I know if some of you know the chamber had got hacked before, so this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So Ray Kim is the director of IT strategy and one of the founders of Simplified IT Consulting, one of our chamber members. His experience includes several years of corporate IT management of large and mid-sized companies, later transitioning to IT consulting to help organizations with their technology needs. His goal is to help clients become better businesses by leveraging, simplifying, and improving their IT systems as a continual process. He predominantly works with clients as a virtual CIO, helping them with IT strategic planning, information security, and budgeting. CIO is Chief Information Officer, just in case no one knows that. But he still gets his hands dirty, keeping his technical skills sharp by helping build and maintain IT solutions for clients. And with that, Ray, take it away.
Okay, thank you so much, Nancy and Fumi, for allowing us to give this presentation, and welcome everybody. So you've all heard my introduction already from Nancy, so I'll just go ahead and get started. So the reason the webinar is titled this way is because email is literally the easiest way to get your company hacked right now, unfortunately. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the reasons why and why it keeps getting worse, and then, of course, how to protect yourself. So on a daily basis, I'm sure your personal email, your work email, you still get phishing emails. You see them all the time. And unfortunately, sometimes we can't always determine which ones are phishing emails. But the rule is that hacking people is easier than hacking systems. It's actually very difficult for even a technically inclined hacker to get through a firewall or to hack a big software as a service system. But if you attack someone with a little bit of social engineering and they already have the keys to the door, why not do that? So that's why phishing is still a massively popular attack vector, because it's just, again, it's easier to hack people than to hack systems. So always keep that in mind. Second is, obviously, we're not going to stop using email anytime soon. It's still the preferred method especially for inter-organization communications. But interestingly, in its current format, it's been around for over 40 years. It's obviously been updated and changed a little bit, and the software that we use to access our emails changed. But really, basically, in its current form, it's over 40 years old, which is incredible. Also, the security standards are not universally enforced. So email as a system is not owned by one company. Microsoft or Google just can't come out and say, hey, we're going to lock it down. We're going to do X, Y, and Z to improve security. It's really just a set of standards that everyone has to agree upon in order to exchange email. As a result, one of the weaknesses is that you can modify emails to show false sender info. Sometimes it can be as lazy as just getting a Gmail account, but slapping a display name on there versus actually what's called spoofing, where they go into the email header and modify the email address that it supposedly was sent from. So just be aware that that's a vulnerability of email at the moment. And also, as I'll show you in a minute, for attackers, for criminals, it's very cheap and very easy to attack with phishing campaigns. Okay, so us humans, as I said, it's easier to hack people than to hack systems, and we are really easy targets. And it's not because we're dumb. Well, maybe some of us, but it's because we're busy mostly. We want to work quickly. So if you go on vacation, for example, and you come back on that first Monday, what's the worst thing that you encounter? It's your inbox, right? Your Outlook inbox or your Google Workspace inbox, and it's just filled, and you want to just knock that sucker down quickly so that you can get to the work that really matters. So that's a really vulnerable time for us, as we're just sifting through a bunch of emails from a weekend or vacation. And then next, attackers, this is very, very common, just basic human psychology. They're always going to prey on common fears and desires. So for example, unauthorized account access. I get these phishing emails all the time. Hey, supposedly there was unauthorized access to your Apple account. Click here to verify. Excuse me. Unauthorized charges. We used to see the ridiculous ones for like $10,000, and we knew immediately that was fake. But now you see, hey, your PayPal account was charged for $24.50. Please verify here. So that's another one that's very commonly used. Expiring passwords. By the way, this is actually not a recommended NIST, Microsoft, every single vendor out there, they all actually recommend against regularly expiring passwords now. And the reason for that was that people would end up storing passwords in insecure places, like a Post-it pad on the front of their monitor or underneath their keyboard, or in a Excel file on their desktop. You know, these are all things that I've seen before. But it got to the point where vendors actually realized it's safer to just not require password expirations anymore. So if you see a password expiration email, it's likely a phishing email. Of course, promotional items and discounts, and obedience to leadership, especially for new employees. New employees, especially in larger organizations, are frequently targeted because they don't know the rules yet. They don't know the people yet. So they're a little more vulnerable to social engineering attacks. Okay, so typically, what are the threat goals? And of course, it's usually money. And how do they get there? So number one, a very common attack method is to try to get your login credentials. So everyone here has probably seen the phishing email with a fake link to a supposed Microsoft or Apple or Google login. And what they're trying to do is steal your username and password, and sometimes even for you to put in your two-factor authentication code, and they'll be able to grab a token and stay logged into your account for up to 30 days. Near and dear to Nancy's heart, unfortunately, redirecting payments. And we have seen this multiple times as well. You know, as I'll show you a real world example here in just a minute, but redirecting payments is a huge threat goal. Good old ransomware, using malicious links to try to get you to click and install ransomware. For those of you who haven't experienced it yet, ransomware is a type of virus that encrypts and locks all of the usable files on your computer. And then they leave you a note saying, hey, if you want to unlock these files, send us X number of Bitcoin to this wallet, and we'll unlock it for you. Meanwhile, they're downloading and selling the data from your system anyway, but that's what ransomware is. Exporting and selling your data, as I just mentioned, that's a very common activity. And installing backdoor access tools. So maybe you get through the threat and you think you've remediated it, but in the meantime, they've set up a shadow account or another way into your network or your system, and you don't even know. Okay, so I was speaking earlier about how easy it is or why it's going to get worse, why it's not going to get better anytime soon. So if you're a cyber criminal and you have no morals, there's a great system called phishing as a service. So we all use software as a service. So for example, if you're using Microsoft 365, or you're using Salesforce, or you're using Dropbox, these are all examples of software as a service. Well, phishing as a service for criminals is a service that they can use.
Yeah, I just
so,
had to go drop something off at the post office.
oh, okay, sorry, we had somebody speaking there. Phishing as a service, this allows criminals with limited technical knowledge who don't need to know anything about how phishing works to launch phishing campaigns. They just need to have a list of email addresses to attack, and they can pay other cyber criminals to use their phishing tools. So here's a screenshot. This is a couple of years old, but I just wanted to show this as an example. This is from a site on the dark web. It was a phishing as a service site that criminals would use called Caffeines. And as you can see here, they would actually charge a monthly fee for you to actually use their phishing service, and you would get tech support, which is pretty incredible. It's kind of cool, dirty and illegal, but it's kind of incredible. And you can see they even have 3 different levels: basic, professional, and enterprise, depending on what kind of tech support you need, and the limits of your phishing operations. So that's how easy it's become for cyber criminals to launch phishing attacks. They don't even have to know anything about the actual phishing software anymore. They can just sign up and use other people's phishing kits or phishing as a service like this. Okay, so a real life example. This was a company that came to us after this particular incident had happened. So one of their key employees was sent a phishing email with a fake login page to Microsoft 365. And unfortunately, she fell for it and put in her username and password and multi-factor authentication code. That gave the attackers about 30 days to stay inside. And what they did is they stayed quiet. And this is the worst kind, where sometimes you've seen email accounts get hacked and it starts spamming out links. That's being done by a bot. Those are the least harmful ones. But this is the worst kind, where this is actually being driven by a real person. And they sit and watch and read emails, and they find out who's the CEO, who's the controller, who has access to bank accounts, who approves payments. So that's what they did in this particular case. They didn't have the CEO's email account hacked. So what they did instead was they registered a lookalike domain where they changed just one character for the company's domain name and registered a very similar looking email address. And then they kind of hit the jackpot. There was an email chain about a big wire transfer. They intercepted the email chain. They created Outlook rules to hide emails about password resets and to hide emails from the real CEO. And unfortunately, they ended up sending $500,000 off to an international bank. So they had to talk to the FBI. I don't know exactly what happened with regard to whether or not they were able to recover any of the money. But obviously, sending $500,000 off is really painful. So this is very, very common. And something, again, the worst thing is someone may actually compromise somebody's account and no one will realize it. Okay, so how do we help avoid these type of scenarios? So email. It's our recommendation that you host your email with either Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace. Now, some of you may have Microsoft 365 through GoDaddy, which is fine. It's essentially the same product. You're just paying GoDaddy their cut. But these two vendors are the easiest to work with in terms of solutions for anti-phishing, anti-impersonation, calling out malicious links, etc. Second is you have to enforce multi-factor authentication on your account. Now, it is possible, again, as I've mentioned, to even with a phishing email and multi-factor authentication to get tricked, but you have to have multi-factor authentication to begin with. A username and password is not good enough these days. So it's not I should do this thing. It is you have to do this thing. And by the way, you need to do that with all of your personal email accounts as well. If you have a Gmail account or Yahoo account or Hotmail account or AOL account, you know who you are, you definitely need to use multi-factor authentication. If you are hosting with Microsoft or Google Workspace, we definitely recommend a third-party anti-phishing system. And the two biggest benefits are they detect impersonation. So again, if someone registers a close lookalike domain name, or they're trying to use somebody's display name on a Gmail account, et cetera, and they're also very good at detecting malicious links and attachments. Microsoft and Google have native tools to do this, but they're not as user-friendly as some of the third-party anti-phishing systems. So Proofpoint is a good example of a good third-party system that integrates with both Microsoft and Google Workspace, and it's a little more user-friendly. Second is never open HTML attachments. So sometimes you'll see email attachments where the icon is the same as the browser you use. So it might have like a Chrome icon or a Microsoft Edge icon. Those are almost always fake login pages designed to steal your Microsoft or Apple or Google Workspace login. So definitely don't open those HTML attachments. The one exception is there are some secure messaging systems that use HTML attachments, but I think you'll know ahead of time because you're probably working with that vendor and you know that vendor. That's the only exception. But for the most part, if you see an HTML attachment with a Chrome icon or a Microsoft Edge icon, just delete it. Okay, part two. if you get a weird email and you're not sure, or if it's a legitimate email and you're not sure, you can take your cursor and hover over the link. Now, one of the unfortunate things about email is that you can use HTML code, which allows you to apply a different link to whatever text is presented on the screen. So in my example here, the website looks like it's going to appleid.apple.com, but on the back end, I can make a hyperlink to myshadydomain.ru, which is obviously not apple.com. But you won't know this unless you actually hover over the link and give it half a second, and it'll show you the actual destination. So this is something that you can do to check links that come in. By the way, the only part that matters, sometimes those links are very long. The only part that matters is what's between the first set of slashes. So those first two slashes right after HTTPS, and then the next slash. That's the only part that matters. And if you see .ru or .pk or some weird domain that you're not accustomed to, or it doesn't look like it's associated with that company, then you can probably safely delete that email. All right. Second, if you're really worried that your Apple or your PayPal account is or your bank account has been compromised, pick up the phone and call, or log into your account separately. Obviously not using the link that was emailed to you, but just open your browser and go to that vendor's website, log in, and just make sure there isn't any weird activity. Okay, and then third, when it comes to the situation that I was talking about with the company whose email was compromised, and they sent out $500,000 to the attackers, put a simple protocol in place for payment authorization. So draw a line in the sand and say, hey, anything over X hundred or X $1,000, I have to pick up the phone and get authorization from so and so. It's amazing how many small organizations don't have something like that in place, but that's what can save a lot of companies from this type of headache. Okay, so very important associated with this is cyber liability insurance. If you haven't heard of this before, or you don't currently have a cyber liability insurance policy for your business, I would highly recommend looking into it, talking to your broker, and seeing what's available. So these are some of the benefits that they provide. So one is they provide liability coverage if a breach affects your customers. They'll help cover legal fees and expenses. They'll help with remediation and data recovery. This is very important. They actually want to help you get up and running as quickly as possible, so they will actually help you. They'll bring in their experts with forensic IT services to investigate the incident so they can figure out where it came from and help protect you in the future from that type of attack. They even do some PR work for you, customer notification and crisis management. But just a note, a lot of policies exclude state-sponsored attacks. So, for example, a few years ago, there was a Chinese state-sponsored hacking group that hacked Microsoft Exchange email servers around the planet. Not Microsoft 365, but companies that still had their own email servers. And that organization had 4 previously unknown vulnerabilities in their back pocket, which is incredible. So a lot of insurance companies won't cover against those type of things because those types of organizations have basically unlimited resources. Okay, now just a warning though, when you do call your broker about cyber liability insurance, there's going to be a long list of requirements, and they used to give out insurance policies without much checking before, but obviously the payouts have increased their scrutiny of customer networks and customer cloud systems. So now these are just some examples of, don't worry, I'm not going to drag you through all this, but these are just some examples of some of the requirements that they might have before you actually are granted a policy. And you're certainly going to have to work with your IT staff or vendor to make sure that all these things are set up. And that requirements list is going to get longer every year as they keep paying out more and more claims. Okay, so that's the conclusion of the presentation. Thank you so much. And Nancy, let me know if there's any questions here. in the chat.
There are no questions in the chat right now, but here's my question. Do you know companies that specialize in the cyber insurance? Because I know like we had to get a writer on our policy, and I don't even know if it's adequate. I just screenshotted that screen so I could double check. But I know a couple other organizations are having trouble. Their own policies will not have a writer or an extension on that.
Yep. So if you, there are some brokers that are more knowledgeable in this area than others. But for example, some of the companies that, one of the companies that almost always seems to come up is called Tokyo Marine. Of course, no one ever hears of them until they have to go to get a cyber liability insurance policy. But you really have to talk to a few different brokers. And when you find that broker that's really hooked in, you'll know immediately because they'll know who the providers are. And yeah, some of your existing policy underwriters may not want to do an add-on policy. So you might have to get a completely separate policy. Very common.
Yeah, I'm like for me, who has it now after our big spoof and hack thing, it's like I always wonder if mine's even adequate. And I listened to someone else who got it because of my story, and I'm thinking maybe I need to move my cyber insurance there, keep my regular insurance the way I have it, and just separate and not have them on the same policy. But
Yeah, it's definitely a good idea to ask your broker. It doesn't cost you anything to ask them about it, and to ask about the limits, by the way. You know, is 1 to 5 million enough? And you have to think about the worst case scenario. For example, if you have a business with sensitive client data and that gets breached, is it possible that your clients or customers are going to sue you? So, these are kind of the second order thinking cap things you have to apply when you're thinking about the limits on your policies.
I don't see any questions in the chat. Well, here's one. Sorry, it just came up. Do you have any samples of suggested email policies to give to new or existing employees to avoid these issues?
So for our clients, we do have an IT security policy section that typically gets amended to whatever it is that they have to sign from the HR department, and it goes through best practices. And I hate to use the word common sense. I'm not sure that exists anymore, but it goes through some really simple best practices around email. But the most important thing that we actually do now is, and maybe some of you have seen these, are the security awareness training applications, the ones that send you fake phishing emails to test you. And for me, for us, we do this because we need to know who the clickers are amongst our clients. And those are people that might need a little more attention or some training on how to spot phishing emails. But that's a really important thing. It kind of keeps everybody's brain fresh with regard to like, hey, I gotta, be more aware when I'm looking at these emails.
We have Office 365 for our emails, and I was getting these emails telling me that I needed to update something and talk to the admin for our emails. I am the admin for the emails. It's like, so why are you sending this to me? But I didn't realize they were sending it to Fuyumi and who everyone else in the office. And luckily Fuyumi asked me about it, because otherwise she could have clicked on it and created a whole other world of problems. And I'm like, no, don't click on anything, because we have our whole IT things managed anyhow. They're keeping up to date on it. And so, you have to make sure that whatever's in your IT maintenance package includes all that stuff too.
That's correct. And by the way, and we do use advanced filtering systems for our clients, but no system is perfect. Please keep that in mind. There are, it's always a cat and mouse game in terms of configuring phishing emails so that they will get past filters. So occasionally stuff does get through, but you do need to have an advanced system to at least help you and eliminate that 99.8% of, or whatever it is, of emails that phishing emails that come through.
So Ray, you were mentioning about companies don't want you to change your email anymore. So I've noticed when I go, because I have my credit report monitored, and it tells me that my email has my password compromised on the dark web. So of course, like Experian or whoever is suggesting you go back in and you change your email, your password. And which also makes me leery because I don't really know if it's now that's coming from experience. I mean, I don't trust anyone anymore.
Right.
I'm going to go live in my own island with my own bubble and build my own system. But you know, it's interesting that you're saying that because you like if you run your credit report, it'll give you these alerts and it'll tell you like how many times your email has been viewed or maybe used.
Yeah.
Somewhere. They're not checking your social security number. It's like your email password.
Right.
So how does that like should you just ignore that?
That is an awesome question. And I didn't go into that specifically for this presentation, but I'm sure a lot of you have seen this exact same thing, as have I, by the way, where you get legitimate alerts that your email or your password or your information is on the dark web or is being sold on the dark web. So when I mentioned earlier that NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, actually recommends against regularly changing passwords, and Microsoft and Google and every other vendor. The one exception is of course, they say if your password has been compromised, that's the time to actually change it. Now, this dark web thing, try not to freak out, but so many companies' databases have been compromised over the years, and that information gets leaked on the dark web, and people try to package it and sell it to other criminals. It is almost unavoidable at this point. Now, hopefully, you know, the newer systems in the past few years, I'm sorry, vendors have updated their systems and password requirements so that's not as susceptible as before. But I don't know if people remember this, but in 2016, LinkedIn actually had a huge hack and the passwords were easily decryptable. So like everyone's LinkedIn password, if you haven't changed it since 2016, you definitely need to change that one. That one was out there, and I mean, you're talking like you just needed 2 seconds to decrypt that password from the hash, and you could go and try that person's email address and password on whatever banking sites and vendor websites. So that's something to be aware of. But just understand that occasionally, your information may get out there on the dark web. And if it's specifically passwords and if you've seen alert and it shows like part of a password that you do use and you know that it's been compromised, then you do want to go ahead and change it.
Yeah. You have to remind me that later. I'm gonna have to call you every time I get one of those.
Okay, I hope I didn't make everybody super paranoid there.
Ray, you said it nicely. I tell people, your passwords are out there. What's stopping people from logging in is the MFA. It doesn't matter what password with the dark web, it's out there. So you were nice. You said it nicely. You were a little bit nicer than I am.
Right. Right. Yeah, unfortunately, this is accounts can now be hacked from anywhere on the planet, literally, right? I mean, for some of our Microsoft 365 clients, for example, if I look into the security logs, I can see someone's account getting hammered, from all over the planet, and we have to create rules to make sure that the account can't be logged in from, any country except X, Y, and Z. So for a lot of these high-profile public companies that have juicy user databases, it's kind of inevitable that we're going to see more and more compromises. And it's not, if you read a summary report of all the major compromises that have happened just in this year alone, it will make you paranoid. But yeah, RT, you're right. A lot of it is just out there. So the multi-factor authentication is not I should think about this kind of thing. It's a you need to do kind of thing.
Okay, so let's talk about MFA.
Yeah.
Like for instance, there are some accounts we have at our office that you don't have a team on it. And I'm talking something really simple, like constant contact, I mean, you can put other people on your team, but like there's a version they give Chambers. And if we do that, then we're gonna have to pay millions of dollars when right now we get it for like free, right? It's not millions, but so when on the rare occasion it does an MFA, it goes to my cell, right? But Fumi is the one that's doing it. If I'm on a plane traveling somewhere, then she can't get that MFA. And so some of these are other issues, right? So there's companies that don't enable MFA because they don't want that to happen.
Right.
Or the MFA is so cumbersome. Like we have Shopify, and I stopped our MFA because it was literally taking me an extra 15 minutes to log in.
15 minutes, yikes. Okay.
Because if I did it from my phone, it would first send me an email saying there was a new login. Then I had to verify that login. And then it would send me another MFA from the phone. But then I'd go back to my computer and it would say, well, now you switched to the computer. Now we got this other, I mean, I literally could be within seconds of doing it. And it was taking me a really long time, but now you're making me scared that I probably need to go back in and put that MFA back on.
Okay, so yeah, you should be a little scared and you should do that. Sorry, that's 15 minutes. That actually sounds like a really bad experience. I guess Shopify needs to go back to the drawing board there. But second is, there are some systems out there that allow you to share like password managers that also will handle multi-factor authentication. So for example, we do that for our clients. Like we need to log into some of our client systems. And so I might have 3 different technicians, for example, that need to log into it. Well, I can't have the multi-factor authentication be my phone all the time. So we do have a system that actually handles the multi-factor authentication as well. So it generates the TOTP, stands for temporary one-time password code, that you enter in after the password. But that's a system that all of the techs have access to. Now, for their personal access to that system, of course, they have their MFA tied to their phone or their device, whatever. So once they get past all those barricades, then we do have one system that manages that. So if you need a suggestion for that, I can help you with that afterward.